August 23rd, 2019, San Francisco. The Sales Development Conference, the third annual conference focused and dedicated 100% to sales development. Join over 500 of the most influential sales development leaders in our industry for a full day of learning, networking, and growing your skills. This year, we're offering 3 learning tracks focused on sales development leadership, rep training, and our newest track dedicated to sales and marketing operations. Grab your tickets today before it sells out over at tenbound.com/conference. That's tenbound.com/conference. See you August 23rd. You're listening to the Sales Development Podcast, the only audio forum focused and dedicated 100% to sales development. If you care about growing your skills and getting more new sales appointments, pipeline, and closed-won deals, you came to the right place. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, iTunes, or Spreaker, and be sure to go back and listen to all the episodes for the best strategies, tips, and tactics out there on running a high-performance sales development program. And now, your host, founder, and CEO of Tenbound at tenbound.com, David Delaney.
CRM has been proven to limit sales reps' responsiveness, persistency, and cadence. It's a design flaw, and it's losing you deals. That is why today's sales leaders use sales engagement platforms like VanillaSoft. Check it out. Go to vanillasoft.com and start your free trial.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. I'm your host, David Delaney. I'm honored and blessed to have my next guest on the show, Mr. Mike Farrell. How are you doing today, sir?
Great, David. How are you?
Oh, man, this is probably going to date us, but we're getting near a long weekend here, so I'm feeling it, and I'm just stoked to have you on the show. If you guys don't know about Mike, he ran BAO for a number of years. This is probably the living expert in running a big, complicated, outsourced sales development company from a high level, and someone I've learned a ton from, and I can't wait to share your knowledge with folks on the show. So Mike, thanks for coming on and give us some background on what got you into this industry and what you're working on now.
Sure. Thanks. Well, I was with BAO for 15 years, joined them as it really was a startup when I joined, and now it's 20 years old and humming along. But prior to that, I spent 20 years prior to that in the IT solution space, reselling, integration world, in the channel. And, the 4 years prior, I was VP of sales at PC Connection, which was a large direct seller of computer products and publicly traded company. And, that was a purely inside sales role. Prior to that, I had some inside sales as a field sales role. So I've been in, high-tech sales my whole career. And then moving on to BAO was a chance to get to a smaller company, get out of the public company rat race. And so it was a great run. David, back in 2003, it wasn't called SDRs. They weren't called SDRs or BDRs.
Yeah.
So this is really, in this time period, really saw the evolution of sales and how much it has changed since then has really been dramatic.
It really has. I mean, even when I started the SDR program at Glassdoor, we had Salesforce and lead lists that were within Salesforce and just, Excel files of names and phone numbers. And, fast forward, whatever, it's been 6 years. Now we just released that market map focused 100% on sales development. And there's probably 100 different solutions out there, that are there to help. So it's been amazing. And you had a front row seat. And I'm curious, when you started at BAO and they were more in startup mode, what do you think made them successful, as a company looking back? Because so many startups fail, within the first 5 years. What made them become one of the market leaders in this space, do you think?
The niche, believe it or not, back in 2003, when it was not an accepted practice to outsource appointment setting. If you called in the VP of sales for a tech firm and you told you what, you told them what we did. And a lot of times what you would get for a response is, hey, my reps are supposed to do that,
Of course.
So it really changed quite a bit. A lot of it happened really and this model became prevalent with the advent of SaaS software. And, one of the big changes that happened was the recession, and the what happened, we were 100% of our appointments back then were face-to-face appointments. And then we started, offering conference calls or web conferences probably around 2005 or 6. And then when the recession came around, it was amazing. It fell off the cliff. Just went from, we were 75% face-to-face, and overnight it went down to 40%. Because CFO said, let's control our costs, right? Our travel costs. But at the same time, all the web conferencing, WebEx and GoToMeeting, everything was coming, the technology was coming to bear to aid in the selling process and the communication process. And then all of a sudden this thing called the iPhone came out too. So it was really that confluence of things that really changed some of the selling techniques, and but also the customers are, we're all slammed for time, right? The world's, with the technology, the world's going super fast, business is going incredibly fast, and it's more commonplace now for buyers to say, you know what, I'd rather just talk to you over the phone. So. Sure. So the things really transitioned to, and that's really what I think has accelerated this SDR model. So it's really been fascinating to see that over the past 10 years.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And so did the recession help you think? I mean, in that, there was a convergence of wanting to reduce costs by going to the inside sales model, and then the fact that the economy went off the cliff. And so did that actually help you? Because then companies would be like, look, we can outsource this and set up phone meetings, and then we'll keep our salespeople busy. Is that?
Yeah, we kind of grew in spurts. So, grew from about 25, 30 people when I got there and up to over 200 people now. About 70% of the people are on the phone. Doing the work. So I have about 140 or so people doing the call, SDR, BDR model type calls for the clients. So, and just for the record, I'm no longer at BAO, so just want to make sure that's clear. I left in July, but I still refer people to them, and they're a quality company and really a category leader in this space. So it was certainly privileged to be able to help the company grow in that time period.
Got it. Okay. So the growth came in spurts, not necessarily a big, huge, influx of business based on the recession. It just kind of grew up. And then I'm sure that the reputation of the company, went out into the marketplace, and more people just kind of built up like a flywheel.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because once the acceptance, it wasn't evangelical anymore to go out there and pitch someone outsourcing and actually having a different group set appointments for your sales team. So the evolution of the sales model and process, certainly helped the acceptance of that service. And then, certainly more people kind of joined the outsourced community in terms of service providers. So, but the predominantly thing for BAO, it's always been a performance-based model, which was very appealing. And a lot, early on, a lot of the clients were startups, but more recently, over the past 7-8 years, it's been more larger companies that are clients of BAO. So larger tech firms, as well as a fair amount of startups as well. So it's really a mixture now.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So for someone who's not super familiar with the outsourced world of sales development, you mentioned the performance-based model. So What are some of the different pricing structures that are out there? So by performance-based, does that mean that you only bill the client when somebody actually shows up for the meeting? Or how does that work?
Yeah, there's a number of models out there for the outsourced world. I've talked to a number of the firms in my little sabbatical here just to see what everyone's doing. So performance-based, exactly right. So it's a per meeting fee after the meeting occurs. But there are other companies out there that do it on an hourly basis, based on just pure activity, phone calls, with not a whole lot of results guarantee. There's companies out there that do it on a per headcount basis per month or partial months. And I've actually found some folks out there too that do full cycle selling outsourcing, which was interesting to find that. So it's really it's really across the board. There's different models out there. So really it's going to depend on whoever the company is that's looking for an outsourced firm to really evaluate and find out what their goals are, and then find out who the right fit is.
Find out the one that works. And so with performance-based, it seems like, and it just in my experience in working with outsourced firms, what's tricky there is like, what does actually a qualified meeting, what is the definition? And is it shared across the board? Because, and I'm sure this is like going to give you nightmares. Like when you go back, you're not going to be able to sleep tonight just with the memories. But isn't it the case where you set up, as the outsourced provider, you set up a great meeting with just the right person and they show up and everything, and then the client comes back and says, that meeting sucked?
Oh yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the, yeah.
Well, we've learned over the years, number one is you got to set in your statement of work, you have to set up what the service level agreement is. What's the definition? Everyone asks for a BANT lead, right? They want the Glengarry leads, right?
Yeah. I wonder if anybody's going to get that on this, but yeah, it's a movie. It's from. Oh man, that's a good one. Yeah, they want the buyer with the silver pen, the expensive pen, and cufflinks, ready to sign the contract, right?
Yeah,
when you deliver the meeting.
They want to walk in and have a PO, and the guy's got a PO on his desk.
Right. But
right.
That's not how it works.
Yeah, it doesn't happen like that. So, and honestly, if that was the case, then sales would be easy and you wouldn't have to make that much money, right? That's just a fallacy. And really, especially, when you think about it, by the way, we focused on tech firms and software and technology firms. But I found a number of firms that focus on different markets, that focus on the financial companies. And so it's interesting. Companies I never heard of that basically do the same thing, but they just focus on different sectors. But for the tech space, the BANT is kind of the marketing term that everyone likes. And of course, the marketing people get beat up by the salespeople, right? They want the marketing people to deliver them everything on a silver platter. But it really defining what good looks like, what the service level agreement is important, and really you got to just be incredibly focused on making sure the customer doesn't scope creep, and you hold the customer accountable too. So it's a balance between getting the customer what they want and making sure they're not taking advantage of you.
Yeah, and I assume, like, if, say, BAO, as an example, has 200 employees, 140 are actually, doing the outreach, then you've got 60 people, and a few of those administrative people are like project managers or managers who interface with the clients and have to have these tough conversations every day. Right.
Yeah, there's some client success people that manage the clients and so forth. But okay. we set up a closed loop communication that really held the client rep accountable and our calling person accountable to delivering quality, and we measure them on that. That was a real key innovation that we did. So we because we're outside their their ecosystem, their CRM system that they're using. So there has to be some really good communication and close that loop on that appointment.
Yeah, because I'm sure over the course of 15 years, you heard every one of these little like nuances and complaints and all these different things. They just keep coming up. So that you had to go back and create a process, because it's coming. They're going to say this,
Yep.
right?
And one of the things we did the last few years is we really did it for coaching purposes, coaching the callers. We call them ISRs. Other people call them BDRs, SDRs. So we had a call recording system, ExecVision, if anyone has used ExecVision. And it changed the game from a coaching standpoint, which was fantastic. But one of the other use cases that really came out of it was a quality assurance. And if we got a complaint on something, we could go back and listen to the actual appointment being set, and make sure that it was quality on our end. And that was very helpful to triage anytime you got a complaint.
Got it. Okay, so you would record the calls of the actual appointments being set. So that's on your end that you can control. But did you record the calls of the sales rep at the client company conducting the call to see what the quality was of that?
No, that would be on their system. So
got it.
They should every team should, I believe. Isn't it great if you're a VP of sales or a CEO to be able to actually listen to some actual sales, whether it's mostly telephone, but interactions with your sales reps and your customers. That's a great tool.
Totally. I mean, that's why Steve Richard has done an amazing job with ExecVision, and there's a couple other competitors that are coming up. It's like that was a huge hole, in this marketplace that they're filling really well now. I mean, it's like, how did we live without that if you don't know what the people are saying that are representing your company? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I go back a long ways, and I remember putting a little suction cup on the actual telephone. And having a tape recorder.
You got to go back. That was me doing a tape recorder. So let me ask you this. Now, the phone. I'm interested in the phone as a medium, because a lot of people are saying with the advent of like call blocking and people not so much picking up their phone if they don't know the number and stuff like that. Like in your experience, you've mentioned callers, people on the phone. Like, was it mainly calling, or did they use any other methods? And does calling still work, in your opinion, based on what you saw?
Well, calling still works because that's the only thing, we did at BAO. I can't speak for them any longer in terms of what what changes may happen in the future, but it still works. It takes a lot of focus and a lot of customized systems in place to get the volume right. The metrics are 150 calls a day, 7 or 8 conversations, and hopefully a couple appointments, depending on the skill of the person and their tenure. You could really, it's a linear line. The close ratio from a new person to an experienced person. We had 6 different levels of people, and it was literally everyone made this, within range. Everyone made the same amount of calls. Everyone had the similar amount of conversations. It was all skill of how the close ratio of how well people performed and how they progressed over those six levels. It still works. Definitely a lot of the newer things that are being brought to bear with a lot of the technology tools available, and digital marketing, driving inbound leads. That's all great. I mean, it should all be part of the mix, right? It's anybody that wants to just hang their hat on one thing, I think, is wrong. If you have the basics of knowledge of the marketing principles down, it's in the sales. You look at your lead source. You got to do a lot of things, right? There's no silver bullet.
Are you in sales, but you're not using a sales engagement tool? Then you're probably losing out on revenue because you are not engaging with prospects at the right time, with the right cadence, and with enough persistency. You need VanillaSoft. Start your free trial today. Go to vanillasoft.com.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work. And I'm curious, and I don't know how involved you were, but from a process perspective, it seems like data is like the lifeblood of the whole thing, right? If you're asking somebody to make 150 calls, then you got to have a lot of good names and phone numbers, right? So like if you got into an engagement with a client, would they supply you data? Would you get the data yourself? How would you come up with that amount of volume to keep people busy for that much time?
Good question. So we had, the byproduct of our calling is we have cleansed the names of people, right? You add people to the database and you cleanse your existing database. So as part of the efforts, so our clients would only give us, BAO's clients would only give them company names or account names, in locations. And then obviously the persona they want to get a meeting with, whether it's an IT person or an HR person or finance person, depending on what you're pitching. And, if we didn't have the right person, that's what the person's, our caller's job was, to find the right person. Well over 1 million names in the database.
That's amazing.
Already. So when you have that many people doing that many calls, it ends up being millions of calls every year. So you get a lot of data that way.
And it keeps it clean because they're live checking to see if the person still works there. And then did you have, as part of the administrative staff, was there somebody in charge of data, like at a high level, like, somebody who's in charge of plugging everything in to make sure that it stays clean and everybody knows where it is?
Yeah, good question. Yes, that was a position that was put in place a few years ago by Jim, the CEO, and it was very important that we kind of elevated that and really tried to harvest and curate and try to analyze it to see if we can improve the productivity in certain areas as well. So
yeah.
definitely got a lot out of that particular effort.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems huge because you could be spinning your wheels a lot. It seems like the more I talk to people and just look at these programs and how they're set up, the data is sort of the foundation, of the whole thing. It's like, it just, as far as efficient processes, especially if you're making 150 calls a day, the data is huge.
You can't be built for speed if you don't have the contact names. What I would say to companies, whether they're building their own SDR team or outsourcing it or both, is you really got to put the upfront work into identifying the right accounts you want to go after. What's the ideal customer profile? Because, if it's just, random downloaded list with, not a lot of thought put into it, you're going to waste a lot of time, right? It's the more targeted the list, the better. It can't be 35 companies, right? It has to have some oomph to it. To your total addressable market has to be bigger than 35 companies, right, to be a viable business.
Yeah. And I would think one of the first questions, if you're looking at an outsourced program that uses hourly basis or monthly retainer, per SDR, the first question I would ask is, what are we going to do about data? Because especially if I'm paying out of pocket someone per hour, like I want to make sure that they have the right targets and they're not just wasting their time, because you're not even talking performance based at that point. It's just you're paying somebody per hour to sit there and do the job. And and you have some data companies on your technology roadmap there, and because that's part of if you're starting up an organization, right, that's you gotta address that. And I just there's Zoom info out there that D&B Hoovers has gotten much better. Their platform is really nice now. There's companies out there that can help with data. I know there's a bunch of startups too that harvesting them in different ways, but and it's a specialty. It's like you said, when you guys brought in the data specialist and elevated that position. It's really important for people to think about. And I'm also curious, Mike, with the skill levels, the six different levels. So say like you had a pretty even playing field. Everybody was being held to the same process. And then you've got these 6 levels of skill. Like, how did you know when they were ready to move to the next level, and what did they have to do, to move up 6 levels? How long did it take? How long did people work there in that position to go through the 6 levels? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's very meritorious. So it's all metrics driven. So that was you still get some complaints that, well, if I had that guy's list, that kind of thing, it's like,
oh yeah.
And there's envious people everywhere. So, but if, people focused on their skill development, focused on themselves instead of looking elsewhere, you get better. We would coach them and we gave them that coaching tool, the Exec Vision as a coaching tool, and we had what we called BAO Academy, a 6-month training program with over 60 courses we would teach and get them through. So we invested a lot in that. So everyone moved at a different pace based on what skill they brought to the table, what experience they brought to the table. BAO's model wasn't always, hire someone right out of college. It's a matter of fact, it was for a long period of time, it was to hire someone with more experience. And there's quite a few people there that are career, SDRs, BDRs, and can make really good money doing it. That's still the case. But there's also now, with the economy and tight labor market is what it is, there's more of a push to go out and get people that are right out of college because they don't have jobs yet, getting people to, if they're already employed, unless they're looking to leave an industry or a company that's struggling, there's just not as many people out there. So you got to fish where there's, the fish are.
Exactly. So, but where was BAO? Was it everybody under one roof? So all 200 people?
There's 4 locations.
Okay. 4 locations.
Three in New England, 1 in Arizona.
Gotcha. Okay. And so you were hiring from that marketplace, either New England or Arizona, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because there's a couple of things I want to ask you about. Like, the career SDR thing is interesting. Like, we were at the meetup the other night and they didn't really go into it, but there's not a lot of diversity out there, in the SDR field because it's kind of a cookie cutter approach to get people right out of college, and they all kind of end up being the same and stuff like that. And I feel like it's accepted to bring some ageism, to the whole thing. Like, if you're over 30 or over 40, it's like, why would you want to be an SDR? But, to your point, like, some of the best SDRs out there are over 40 and they just want to be SDRs because they're good at it and making good money, and people just overlook them. But it sounds like you're saying that there's just not a lot of them out there. And so you kind of have to go to the young college route because that's the people that need jobs, even if they're not as good or, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a mix. Experientially, it used to be very rarely would we hire someone right out of school, but now it's more of a balance. But and actually talking to a number of other outsourced companies over the past 4 or 5 months, that just trying to make some professional connections and so forth, and learning about everyone else's business. There's actually, in the outsourced world, it really falls into those 2 camps where there's some people that are going strictly, young people right out of school, and then there's other folks that are going, a more mature professional, and a lot of them will work remotely too. Those career SDRs are a lot of them, and I'm talking specifically in the outsourced companies.
Right. And so you could have someone who's just really good at sales and talking to people and hard worker. They work from home, and you give them the data and you give them the process and things like that, and they can just do it from home. Now, that's not the model that BA did, but that's you see that in the outsourced world.
Yeah, and the diversity part of that is more balanced too.
Yes.
In terms of male female, it's when you look at the career SDRs out there, whether they're under one roof in an outsourced world or working from home, it is a little bit more diverse male female than the traditional hire someone right out of college.
Yeah, you would think like if you're taking care of an aged parent or you just had kids and you just can get away for like 4 hours a night and make a bunch of calls and stuff like that. I mean, you could see how if it was a home-based thing, there could be a lot more flexibility. You could get a lot more people into the market. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about, Mike, is this BAO Academy, which is really interesting because not a lot of people invest in training for SDRs, and they just give them some product knowledge and a phone book, and they're like, here, go make some calls, So you guys, it looked like you really took it seriously. You created an academy that people went through. What was that like? What did they have to do to go through that?
Well, it took 6 months. We wanted to make sure.
Wow, I thought it was 6 weeks. Okay, 6 months.
No, we wanted to make sure. We wanted to make sure that everyone had the same content. In 4 different locations, different managers, different training staff. We wanted to make sure people had the same content across the board. So we, put it in kind of the college curriculum kind of structure. That was a big investment, but definitely worth it to make sure. Again, you want to make sure there's an even playing field in terms of the tools people are given in the coaching and training they're given, and then everyone's no one can do the job for you. Yeah, right. You got to pick the phone up and do it. No one's going to book a meeting for you. You got to do it on your own. So it becomes very meritorious, but we got to get that culture of investing in yourself and taking accountability for your own development, because there are a lot of skills, right? I just finished listening to your podcast and the young lady from Indianapolis, and talk about a very articulate and well-spoken young professional. She's that's the kind of skill that people develop by doing this job.
Totally. And I like the fact you're talking about leveling the playing field as much as possible and then setting up those skill levels, so you level the playing field. You work on the data, get them this sales academy. And then, at the end of the day, though, you gotta do the job, like you said. And to your point, I mean, what a great way to learn how to communicate succinctly and be articulate quickly and move people along than being an SDR.
I'm a big advocate of training. Matter of fact, I'm doing a little advising now with Factor 8. Factor 8 has a great program from inside salespeople. There's and it's all video based, and so it's on demand, 365, 24/7. So that's a great kind of academy type content that can be delivered to SDRs at a very reasonable price, and again they have to take that personal accountability to invest in their own career development. The Factor 8, they call it the sales bar. So that's kind of the next. That would be the thing that I wanted to do before at BAO, was to really take that content and get it video based, so it's not all instructor led. So, and Factor 8 was able to do that. So I think that's a great type of program that any SDR team can really latch onto and put that accountability on people to develop themselves.
To get it done. And that's what I was going to ask you with the academy that you guys set up. So it was all classroom based. I mean, it was instructor based. So like they would have to go in for an hour a day or not an hour a day, but like once a week and do an hour of training in a conference room. Is that right?
Right.
Wow. For 6 months. So that's a huge, that's taking it to another level. That's a huge investment of, the curriculum and the time, right, of people.
Well, it's, you'll think about it. You think of a professional athlete, right? How
Yeah.
whatever sport, I'll use baseball, right? So since the Red Sox just won the World Series. So, the game is 2 hours, 3 hours long. How much practice do you think they do?
Yeah.
Or basketball.
All
Basketball
week.
game's 2 hours.
40 hours. Yeah.
How much practice do they think? And see, in business, the problem is we were in the game, dealing with live ammunition more than we're practicing. So you really have to inject that training and practice, especially in sales, a little bit more to make sure when you do have a live call, you're putting your best foot forward for the company.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and people don't look at it that way at all. I mean, they're just like, I mean, the sports analogy is perfect because, you're basically asking someone to go out into the Super Bowl against the Oakland Raiders, and with no helmet and no practice and no training. And then you're like, why did we get our ass kicked? It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, a baseball player gets up 4 times a game in a at bats in a game, but how many swings does he take in the batting cage during the day or during the week or during the winter to prepare for that game?
Yes. It's
how many practice shots did Michael Jordan take? Larry Bird take? They practice for hours and hours before a game or in the off season.
Totally. And I mean, I would just encourage everybody, like the trajectory that you followed over 15 years there to go from startup to a very established company. I mean, and the fact that you would invest that much in an academy and the time and giving people the training that they need to be able to be successful, and then setting up the levels. I mean, I think that's something that we could all think about if they're doing that at their company right now. So Mike, what are you working on now? You've got a few different pots on the boil there. We were talking the other night about one of your ventures that you're starting up. Can you just remind me what that was? Because that looked pretty cool.
Yeah, I got a kind of 3 things working right now. So I've been, in this little sabbatical time, I've had a lot of conversations with private equity firms, venture capital firms, and there's a play there, I think, for to help some of them in the world of building out SDR teams, optimizing SDR teams, as well as just general sales consulting. So that's kind of one avenue that I'm working on, and the other 2 are really still in the lead gen world, a digital marketing play as well as a direct mail play. So those are kind of the three-legged stool that I'm trying to build here.
Nice. You're keeping yourself busy, and like you said, it's multi-channel, it's omni-channel. You got to think about all these different angles. Because people are just like inundated with different messaging. So try different things. Direct mail still works. Digital marketing still works. The phone still works.
Yep.
All these things. So
exactly. You can't. Yeah, you gotta do it all. But on the inbound marketing world, I mean, you definitely still a lot of old school companies out there that haven't embraced that, and you got to get the right digital footprint and activities to drive that, and that I totally believe in that. So I'm not advocating for 100% cold calling, although if someone needs that, they need to call a company like BAO because they can do it very, very well. Or there's other companies out there that do it as well that can help. And a lot of times we coexisted with a lot of inside sales teams. A lot of companies will still use an outsourced provider while they have an inside team. So
definitely.
It definitely can work that way too.
Yeah. I mean, you want to use all the tools that you have in your arsenal. And I remember, when this first was brought to me when I was running a sales development team, my VP was like, hey, we want to bring in this outsource firm. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. Like, cause I grew up in the 80s, right? So whenever you hear the word outsource, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to be eating out of a garbage can, but, but that is not the case. I'm actually, some of the highest performing companies out there, they've got an inside team and they're working with like a BAO at the same time. And it's a little rivalry, it's a little, both sides the game is being elevated because, they're kind of both trying to figure out what the message is that will get the appointments. So I would just, leave you guys with a note that if someone says like, hey, we want to bring in this thing, you're not going to get outsourced per se. Like it's actually just another tool in your toolbox that, can be used. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and unpacking this for people. I learned a ton about the industry, and I'm really excited to track your movements as you move on to new ventures. But we really appreciate it, and we'll have you on again.
All right, appreciate it. Take care, David.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Development Podcast, the only audio forum 100% focused and dedicated to sales development, with your host, David Delaney. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube and take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes. Your support makes our show possible. If you are struggling with your sales development program, contact us at tenbound.com for a no-obligation exploratory call. Again, that's tenbound.com.